This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Today on CityCast Boise, the arrest of a local man for allegedly inciting murder and terrorism sent shockwaves through the Treasure Valley. We've got the details on his white supremacist beliefs, his hit list of targets, and how his propaganda may have led to international murders. It's Monday, September 16th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Joining me today is Nicole Blanchard, a reporter with the Idaho Statesman. Thank you for joining me today, Nicole.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I just really want to jump in. Who is Matthew Allison and what has he been charged with?
Sure. So Matthew Allison was arrested by federal officials. He is a Boise resident. There's not a whole lot more that we know about him at this point, but he has been charged with 15 different federal crimes, among those solicitation of murder of a federal official. He has several counts on that. He has several counts of solicitation of a hate crime, doxing federal officials, interstate threatening communications, and providing aid to terrorists.
Wow. Do we know, you said there's not necessarily a lot of information about him. Do we know how long he's been in Boise, or kind of general, he's been here a while, he just got here?
We don't actually have any of that information yet, and that's stuff that I'm working on trying to figure out. As far as we know, he was living in an apartment in downtown Boise, and that's as much as we've been able to confirm at this point.
And how was he soliciting murder and hate crimes? How do people do that?
Sure. So if you're familiar with the social media site Telegram, he was part of a community that is various channels, group chats, that has been dubbed Terrorgram, which is kind of a mashup of terrorism and Telegram. And it is people who are looking to further a white supremacist agenda. So he was using that platform and other means, publications, documentaries, things like that, to communicate with other people, to teach them how to make explosives, to maintain a list of potential murder targets, and encouraging people and giving them the means to go after these targets and commit violence. And that's according to the indictment from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of California.
Okay. And that's I definitely want to really dive in and pull that all apart. There's a lot there. But according to the Department of Justice indictment, that Matthew Allison is a white supremacist, was promoting white supremacist ideology. What were some of his goals, or what was he allegedly trying to achieve through this terrorism?
Sure. So according to this indictment, he was part of communities that are known as accelerationist. And the idea is to kind of accelerate a societal collapse, get rid of traditional government and the society that we currently have, and spur a race war that would eventually end in a white ethno-state.
Wow. We recently in Idaho had a neo-Nazi group that tried to attack a power grid here. And is that at all to Matthew Allison and Terrorgram or this network?
So I don't know for certain that they're related, in that the District of Idaho U.S. Attorney's Office has told me they can't comment on that. What we do know is that some of those folks were affiliated with groups that have ties to Terrorgram. So there's definitely some interweaving there. The intricacies of, whether these people knew each other, whether Matthew Allison was an influence for these people who had planned to attack the power grid, that much is unclear at this point.
And it seems to me like there has been an increase in white supremacists in Idaho making the news, or more potential terrorism. We saw with Pride in North Idaho, different things where these white nationalist groups are becoming more active in Idaho. Is this all connected? Is Matthew Allison part of this trend, or is it just making the news more, or is this kind of a groundswell of this white supremacist movement?
That's a great question. I think, like I said, we'll find out more as Matthew Allison's case goes along to kind of figure out how all of these things are related. I think we're seeing a lot more of this around the country. Federal officials have said that they're seeing an increase in domestic terrorism. A lot of that is driven and related to white supremacy. And unfortunately, I think we're kind of seeing the fruits of that here in Idaho. I think it's worth mentioning that at the same time that Allison was arrested, a woman named Dallas Humber was arrested on the same charges in California. And a court document that was filed yesterday indicated that she had plans to move to Idaho. And I've covered, other individuals who have moved to Idaho with the intention of creating an ethno-state because we do have such an overwhelmingly white population and we do have very far-right politics.
Nicole, you also reported that he had an official list of potential targets. Who were some of these targets and what kind of information did he have about these people?
Yeah, so according to the indictment, one of the big projects that Allison was involved in was something that they call the list. It was essentially a hit list. We don't know who exactly was on it because that information has been sealed. But we do know that it included federal officials from judges to senators. It included people with the U.S. Attorney General's office. And we know that they were targeting people based specifically on characteristics like their race, their religion, their ethnic background, their sexuality, things like that. So we can't be sure who was a target, but we know it was a pretty extensive list and that there were photos and home address information for these people that was included.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's really scary.
It is.
You also reported that Matthew Allison was offering incentives for murdering these people. What kind of incentives was he offering?
So a big part of this kind of terrorgram culture is this idea of sainthood, where they really revere and kind of deify people who carry out these white supremacist attacks. And the incentive to carry out some of these attacks was pretty much infamy, and being considered a prominent figure and being celebrated by this community. That was really a driving force for a lot of these folks.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. Time is luxury, which is why Polestar spent so much time designing the Polestar 3, their luxury electric performance SUV. It's designed to go further with up to 315 miles of range and immerse you in a unique listening experience powered by 25 speakers. Your favorite daily news podcast has never sounded better. All to make the time you spend behind the wheel of Polestar 3 the best time of your day. Book your test drive at Polestar.com.
This episode is brought to you by Vonage. Are you looking for a fast, affordable way to help your team work better together, even when they're apart? It's easier than you think. With Vonage Business Communications, your team gets a single application for voice, messaging, and video meetings that they can access from anywhere. Plus, it easily integrates with your CRM and other business applications to give your team the rich customer data they need to work smarter, not harder. Learn more at Vonage.com.
Nicole, you also reported that Matthew Allison was using propaganda to incite terrorism, including a how-to guidebook that he also recorded into an audiobook. What was he trying to incite people to do or teaching people to do with this guidebook?
Sure. So this was a major part of the indictment. It's alleged that Allison and Humber both collaborated on this publication, and it had everything from information on how to maintain a terrorism cell to really explicit instructions for making bombs, napalm, other kinds of really dangerous devices.
And you mentioned he was trying to target specific groups of people and was directing terrorists to target specific groups of people. What groups of people was he specifically? I know he was a white supremacist, but what groups was he specifically directing people towards?
So federal officials have said that a lot of the targets were people in the LGBTQ plus community, obviously people who were non-white. A lot of the targets were towards people who are Jewish or Muslim. So a lot of kind of the traditional white supremacy targets. And it seems like in particular, the LGBTQ population got a lot of attention from them, particularly with Pride Month celebrations. It seems as though there was a lot of encouragement from Humber in particular to try to disrupt Pride celebrations with violence.
So were they targeting like groups specifically within the US or more like foreign, like attacks in foreign countries, or really focusing on like attacks on US soil?
The thing about Terragram that is, I think, really interesting and disturbing is that it is this global way for people to connect. So the indictment specifically ties Allison and Humber to 3 incidents. One of them was a planned attack on an energy facility in New Jersey. So you've definitely got stateside planning and intention there. And then they were also tied to some international incidents. So they took responsibility for a fatal shooting outside an LGBTQ club in Slovakia. They received a manifesto from the shooter. They deified him after he carried out that attack. And they were connected to a pretty recent stabbing outside of a mosque in Turkey. So wow. A lot of reach, a lot of potential reach with the geography.
And not only did he create that propaganda publication and audiobook, but he also made a white supremacist documentary. What kind of content was part of that documentary?
The federal indictment said that he helped create a 24-minute documentary that goes through decades of white supremacist attacks and applauds people for carrying out everything from the Dylan Roof shooting in recent years to incidents as far back as the 1960s.
And what kind of an impact did all of this propaganda, these documentaries, all of this, information that he had posted have on Terragram? Was it very popular? Was it being reshared?
Federal officials have said that the stuff that Allison and Humber created was very widely disseminated. They were found in possession of the publications themselves, but they've also, been connected, as I mentioned, to some incidents in Europe, to incidents in Turkey. So as far as I understand, these were pretty landmark and pretty widely disseminated publications, particularly the print publication that included the bomb-making information and other dangerous device information.
Has any information been released about how long Matthew Allison was active on Terragram or creating these materials, this propaganda, encouraging and inciting terrorism?
So the indictment says that both of the defendants joined Telegram in 2019, and it sounds like they kind of rose to prominence around the same time in 2022. So it's not clear how long he's been participating in the community at large, how long he's held these kind of ideals, but it seems like it's been about 2 years that he's been really deeply involved in what is known as the Terragram community.
With this Terragram, like it's kind of scary that thinking about it exists on the Telegram platform. Is there any way to be able to shut that down or regulate that? Or is it just kind of one of the unfortunate realities of the internet?
That is an interesting question because the creator of Telegram has been in his own legal trouble for not complying with regulations in other countries. There's been a big move to regulate. Telegram has allegedly gotten rid of some of these channels and tried to crack down on things, but this is really a prominent platform for people who are engaging in extremist behavior. It's not uncommon that these kinds of conversations are taking place there. And so it will be interesting to see what happens with the regulation of the platform overall. And one thing that I find really interesting and kind of scary is this isn't like a Facebook group where you log into Telegram and you type in Terragram or Terragram Collective and a group chat comes up. These are numerous channels. They're usually pretty difficult to find and difficult to get into, and they're regularly created and deleted. So it can be a really difficult thing to track.
Yeah, that is really terrifying to think that there are these conversations in these groups happening, and just because we know about this one network that this Boise man was connected to, there could be hundreds or thousands more that his information and propaganda is still being shared and used to incite terrorism.
Exactly.
Well, you just dropped a story about Matthew Allison appearing in court. Were there any new details that were discussed or updates to the initial story that came out of that hearing?
Allison's court hearing was pretty straightforward. It was pretty quick. It was heard by Judge Candy Dale. She read the 15 offenses, and he acknowledged that he understood the charges that were against him. He did not enter a plea. And the next kind of big thing that we're looking forward to is a judge will hear the motion to detain. So that will determine whether Allison stays in custody for the duration of the case.
Oh, so he could potentially not be in custody.
Yes. So that is still up in the air right now. The U.S. Attorney General's office has made a really strong case for why both of the defendants should remain in custody. It said that they are a severe flight risk and that they're a severe danger because they have indicated in the past that they would use violence to escape arrest. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. And another kind of interesting piece of this is he allegedly committed these crimes in the District of Idaho, but the grand jury indictment came from the District of Eastern California, which is where Humber is. And so we don't have an indication of how this will play out yet, but it's possible that he will be extradited to California and the rest of the case will take place there.
Can I ask if you know, if he is convicted for these 15 charges he's facing, what kind of a sentence is he looking at?
The charges carry anything from, I believe, 5 years per charge to 20 years, depending on the different charges. And in total, the federal officials have said that if he's convicted on all charges, he could face 220 years in prison. So essentially a life sentence.
Well, thank you so much. This is a developing story, and it's very scary and unsettling and pretty heavy. So thank you for joining me to break this all down.
Thank you for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, check out our Hey Boise newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with another great local story. Catch you then.